Hello, ACDA Eastern Region. My name is Amanda Hanzlik. I am the president-elect of our region, and I am thrilled to bring you a conversation with Dr. Ellen Gilson Voth. Uh, Dr. Voth, you are the winner of the American Prize for Choral Music this year, and we are so thrilled for you. So proud that you are from our region, and we're so excited to explore this piece with you this evening. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. I'm so grateful for just the support of so many people and being able to share this piece with many different people and to this conversation. So thank you, Amanda.
Absolutely. And for those of us who are not your friends, please tell us who you are. Where are you from? Where do you live? Your work? All of those things.
Okay. Well, I'm originally from New Jersey and have lived many different places, but Connecticut has now been home for about 20 years and been very grateful to work with Amanda and fantastic colleagues on the Connecticut ACDA board at different stages and chapters. I did my doctoral study at the Hart School, University of Hartford, and am active as a conductor and as a composer in the area. And just so pleased to be able to talk about Across the Empty Square and my work as a composer in general.
So how did you find choral music? Or how did choral music find you?
uh, the case, I was fortunate to grow up in a home where it was very fertile musically. I didn't have any professional musicians in my immediate family or extended family, but my grandfather would come and play and improvise at our house. And I remember hearing my mom sing in choir at church. And so there was music being poured into me. And as I started to experiment, the environment was fertile. There weren't a lot of voices studying or scrutinizing. I had a lot of free reign. I remember experimenting with some songs, simple songs for voice and piano. I don't think I'd attach my name to any of them now. In my early, elementary, middle school years. But really, it was in high school when, in singing in my high school choir, my choral director, and with whom I was taking a theory class at the time, had me pursue a composition project. And it was a simple project to write a hymn, and it ended up becoming an anthem based on that hymn. But that was really what planted a seed. And I'm very grateful that he then allowed for opportunities for that piece to be performed, and then for me to write things for my fellow students with whom I was singing. And so
that was your first kind of real choral piece.
was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just the fact that he provided those opportunities and mentoring and guidance.
Mm-hmm.
It was a gift without price. And
Mm-hmm.
I've wanted, in future years to be able to kind of pass that on in one way or another to the next generation. And so I'm really grateful for that. And then beyond that, I never studied a lot of formal composition classes apart from theory classes in my undergraduate years. And I would encourage that as a really important basis for work. And then it was later on that I started to do more composition study in graduate school. But the real study came from immersing myself in works of all kinds. As a pianist, composer, and organist, and singer, that's really where just living with so much music from different eras and studying and seeing how composers reached their goals and what made their piece impacting or powerful or joyful or mournful or compelling, and studying that from an architectural and aesthetic view. That was really, I would say, my greatest lesson. And then as time went on, being able to study composition more formally, and then continually getting input from mentors along the way.
Mm-hmm. So, building on that, where do you draw your compositional inspiration from, and how do you feel that your style, that your compositional style and maybe even process has evolved over time?
I would say everything in one way or another kind of impacts our
Sure.
work. I'm thinking of, a poem here or an idea there. I remember one trip on a plane at the holidays, visiting family, where I was in the middle of a project on flight and I was looking out the window and seeing the clouds, and that inspired me to write a bit of poetry. And I won't hang my shingle as a poet by any means, but a little bit that came into the piece. So really just all the experiences. And I would say the same for our work as conductors. It might be something of a recipe, or contact with a neighbor, or some travel experience where we get some image or simile or metaphor that we can use in rehearsal that makes sparks and makes a connection with, for a singer. And I would say the same for our work with composers. It's kind of we look at the fabric of our lives, and all of our life experiences ultimately are going to shape us and can provide inspiration. And then they may be inspiration that we come back to.
Mm-hmm.
It was a book I found years ago on the Tree of Time, and that inspired a recent project on the national parks. But the ideas germinated over a long period of time. So sometimes the inspiration may be fresh from a life experience, and sometimes it marinates over years.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think we should dive into the actual piece that we're here to celebrate. Now that we have a better sense of who you are and your compositional style and your journey to this point, Across the Empty Square was a finalist for the Brock competition. And now it's the winner of the American prize, and it's so thrilling. I know I have more of a personal you know feeling about all of this because you are my friend. We are both from the state of Connecticut. I feel deep pride uh and sentiment toward this piece for you and for this recognition. And so I'm just so excited to hear from you exactly where this piece came from, how it came to be, and the story behind it.
Well, thank you so much. I feel so grateful because so many people have been part of the story, and being able to share it like in this call with you and with colleagues. It really started weeks after the initial shutdown of March in 2020. And I'm thinking back to that because you and I were both at the regional conference in Rochester.
Mhm.
And it was within weeks that Brother Richard Hendrick in Ireland wrote and shared a poem that went all over.
Mhm.
And it was called Lockdown. And the poem begins about, there are phrases about, being in the streets of Assisi and people singing to each other across the empty squares. And it ends with this phrase about opening the windows of your soul. Though you may not be able to touch across the empty square, sing. And I'm sitting here in my house as we're all stunned by what's happening around us. And I read this and I said, that's a piece. That's a piece. How do I find him? So the hunt began. So I found him through some connection online and email and thought, I'll try. So I reached out and he got back to me remarkably soon and said, I'd be pleased for you to set, because I knew I was going to extract sections. The poem's long, it's very detailed, and I knew I was going to be extracting sections. I had the idea of submitting it for the Brock competition in my head, but mainly it was the inspiration of the words independent of that. So then dug in. And as I'm talking to you, I'm looking at, my initial sketches, and I often will work melodic ideas and rhythmic ideas separately. So then the challenge was how to extract fragments of this poem, but create an arc so that the integrity and the essence of the poem was maintained. So I basically wanted to create, it ended up becoming a palindrome, really, because the beginning was about the streets of Assisi, people singing to each other. That connects to the end about singing and opening the windows of your soul. Then the scene in Wuhan, after so many years of noise, you can hear the birds. Then a section, listen, the birds are singing again. And in the middle, yes, there is fear, but there need not be hate. Isolation, it need not lead to loneliness. In our sickness, we can halt disease of the soul. That was the crux. So I basically created these two bookends about the streets of Assisi, and then the bookends about the birds of Wuhan. And in the middle, this idea about, yes, there is this, but there need not be this. And then taking a fairly traditional harmonic progression underneath that, as to imply that there's an inevitability of what can happen, but we also have the power to change its course. That isolation doesn't need to lead to loneliness. The external illness doesn't need to lead to the illness within, the disease of the soul. So I was incredibly fortunate that I had such a rich text. That really was what did it. And as I was working, you have to give composers a deadline. And I was speaking for experience on it. So I, worked, and I knew as I was working, I had a keen sense, this is going to have, this is going to impact. I didn't know how, I didn't know where it would go. But the goal was to say something. It wasn't the goal for the impact. It was to say what I felt the text needed to say.
Sure.
And was incredibly honored when I heard that it was a finalist in the 2020 Rock Competition for Professional Composers. In talking soon after that with Kathy Saltzman-Romy, who is at the University of Minnesota, she and I were connecting about a completely different project. I mentioned this and she was curious. I shared the piece with her. She said, I want to program it for my singers. That led to the connection with Graphite Publishing. They published it. And then now it's been going, and it was orchestrated for a colleague, and it's appearing in all these different places. And I think what stays with me was being able to take that theme, how can I keep from singing? It so captures what we as choral musicians have endured and how unstoppable our art form is, that nothing ultimately is going to stop the power of song. A world pandemic cannot halt what we do. So that's something that was so deeply gratifying at the time. And I'm grateful that so many colleagues and friends have found inspiration in it.
Absolutely. And you're kind of answering it already, but I'm wondering, this composition has reached so many singers, and it has such a strong message, and it holds such a I would say strong, but also dear place for a lot of singers, because it was such a tender time for singers and for choirs in particular. And I'm wondering, almost personally, what does this piece mean to you?
I think it's the journey and the story and the way it brought us together in a time when we were forced separate. That the text originates in Ireland, and a poet trusts a composer across the ocean with his work.
Yeah.
And then it goes to Minnesota, and then and the fact that all these links were created and then perpetuated at a time when links were being cut off, that it was showing exactly what choral music does best in drawing people together from all different walks and paths of life.
And it's just so thrilling to see this celebrated in such a public way. And I'm curious, this is the first time that this prize has come to you. And I'm wondering, what does this symbolize for you? Does it symbolize something for you?
I think one of the reasons I feel so humbled and grateful is because the prize was just so far off out of my thinking in the
Mm-hmm.
process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would say to composers is the best work comes when we have something to say and we hone our craft to say it. And we're so grateful that when honors or recognition comes, and
Of
that's
course.
an incredible gift. But ultimately you want to be the integrity to be in the process and in the craftsmanship of what you deliver. And then that will all find its way on its own. But I think it's because the prize wasn't on my mind in the time of the
Mm-hmm.
writing, just the vulnerability we all felt and the way he captured so much of our human experience, and again trusted me to set his words um, and allow them to reach an even broader audience.
Absolutely. You know, as I look through your bio and your website and uh, your massive list of accomplishments as a conductor and an educator and a composer, um, I do see many different commissions in that list of compositions. Um, I'm a big fan of commissioning work and working with composers, which is why this conversation is just so thrilling for me. But I am curious, how many commissions do you tend to work with per year, every couple of years? You are also very busy as a conductor. And so I'm wondering how that commissioning process works for you, because obvious obviously we are going to give people through this interview access to your score and to your website and your listing of compositions. And while this piece was not uh, commissioned in the typical kind of format, I do want members in our region and beyond to look at you as a resource and a partner, and you know, even beyond this wonderful piece of music that they should all be investigating and, and ordering and singing. But I'm curious about this commissioning process for you as well.
Well, thank you. And I feel very grateful that the two hats I wear as conductor and composer feed each other. So in
Mhm.
conducting, we're asking the why questions. How did this composer do this? Or why did he make this choice? And
Mhm.
what is making this effective? How is this reaching singers? How is this blooming in their voice? So you're asking those questions as we live with music at the podium and share it with our singers. And then as a composer, you're diving into your ideas and how to shape them. So they both very much feed each other and give each other energy reciprocally.
Mhm.
So the number of commissions, and I'll say this on this call, there's always space for another commission if you're thinking everything.
Of course there is.
Always. But it really varies depending on the project and the year. I generally have multiple projects going at once.
Mhm.
That's true for our lives as composers because we typically have more than one group or multiple programs that we're preparing for. So I would say it fluctuates, but what will make it fluctuate is often the size of the project, the deadline, the forces, and sometimes in stages. You might write kind of the beginning stages of something, and if you're going back to orchestrate it or provide a more elaborate score, you put
Mhm.
that on the back burner, you get something else out. So it's
Right.
it's all of our lives. We're constantly shifting what's front burner and back burner, and that's very much what that I would say a typical pattern would be for my work.
Okay. I will admit, at the beginning part of my career as a choral conductor, which has been the past 10 years or so, I had no concept of kind of what the process was to collaborate with a composer. I didn't even know that was a possibility for me as a public school, music educator. And my entire teaching and world of possibility has very much transformed because of my engagement and my students' engagement with composers. And I mean that very genuinely. It's been liberating and intriguing and thrilling to work with living composers. It's an honor, and it's also challenging and exciting and wonderful to birth pieces of music into the choral world. It really is. It's an honor. And I didn't know that I could do that once upon a time. I didn't know that was even a possibility. I thought that was reserved for like college people and professional choirs, and I now know that that's not true. I know that composition is accessible really to everyone. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to our members who might be feeling the way that I felt, several years ago, when I thought that working with a composer was something that was not available to me. What kind of advice would you give to our members about commissioning, about connecting with a composer and that whole process?
I think it's great to have an opportunity to demystify the
Mm.
world of the composer, because we have this sense of, oh, you have the muse,
Right.
somehow. But,
Right.
like all things, you develop a toolbox and then you work different tools to achieve a goal. And sure, there's some muse in, and creativity and idea testing, but there's a lot of nuts and bolts,
Mhm.
muscle, and testing out ideas and defining them and shaping them. And so I think it's really exciting to engage with directors and young singers about that process and
Mhm.
give them a vision for how they do that, in the same way that an artist in a studio is considering different combinations of color. How do we do that
Mm.
as composers?
Mhm.
Various instrument colors or vocal
Mhm.
colors that we're creating through vowel choices.
Sure.
Giving them that sense of this is a living, breathing process. It's not that what we look at on the page that's been gifted to us across generations. There's so much we can learn from that. There
Mhm.
was a human being behind that experienced highs and lows and twists and turns in their life that informed what they do, whether it was written 100 years ago or 300 years ago or was written last month. So it just
Mhm.
breathes life into that process. So
Mhm.
what I would say for anyone who is kind of dipping their toe into the idea of commissioning is to develop as much of a sense of what you're looking for, knowing yourself, knowing your singers, knowing your context, being confident in that.
Mhm.
If it's a small or medium or a large group, if you have tons of experience with commissioning or haven't, that
Mhm.
there's a place in this landscape for you. There's a composer out there that wants to be able to create something unique for you that will have you always have your signature on it
Mhm.
in some way. And so the more confident you are in what you're bringing to the project and the clearer your sense of vision,
Mhm.
that really empowers the composer to know how to set up your singers to shine, because that's the composer's job, is to write something so that your singers are going to shine in bringing it into the world, and that the process is life-giving and energizing for them. And um, as a reminder to composers that ultimately our job is to read and really come underneath the culture and the DNA of that ensemble so that we can do that effectively. And that process, while the end result may be very different depending on the age and experience levels of the singers, it's always testing the composer in the ways we are to be tested and stretched to refine the work that we do.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. Um, I always, of course, want to circle this back to the ACDA, and talk a little bit about how being a member of the ACDA has it impacted your career? How has it influenced you both as a conductor and as a composer?
I think we can all look back at certain experiences we've had, whether it be a concert at a national convention or some session or experience we've had that have been impacting or deeply changing moments for us.
Mhm.
But I think, and I don't discount any of that because that's a big part of how we experience it. But I think
Mhm.
ultimately, because we do so much of our work alone, as a conductor, we spend that time in studying scores alone.
Mhm.
Even in our leadership role, when we're at the podium, we may be making decisions collaboratively, but there's still a sense in which we're in front, and our relationship with because of that, our relationship with the people around us is unique.
Mm.
As a composer, so much of our work is alone, whether it's writing out your initial ideas on staff paper or putting them into finale on your computer screen. So because so much of it is alone, and performers who practice oboe or trumpet or cello for hours can say the same.
Right.
We need a village, we need a think tank, we need people with eyes and ears outside of our own.
Mhm.
Because that's what's ultimately going to stretch us and make us more robust and better fitted for the work that we do. So that's really where, to me, the benefit of ACDA is because we have to have that community. I mean, you could say that of in any profession, but given the
Absolutely.
nature of what we do, given what we've endured together,
Mhm.
and how we've emerged and proven how unstoppable choral music is, it's all the more reason to be building on that community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. We are not alone. We are not alone. Absolutely. So I have another question for you. Will we be seeing you in Cincinnati?
I would not miss ACDA in Cincinnati.
Woo! Yes.
It's a victory lap on one level, celebrating how choral music has proven its power, thinking of all we've experienced since the last national convention was live. At the same time, it's a moment to say, okay, given everything, how do we best do what we do? And how do we continue to energize the work that's been done for hundreds of years? And what is this landscape looking like ahead? And how can we ready ourselves and make sure that this choral art persists for the next centuries? So for all those reasons, I
Yes.
will be there.
I will also be there, and you know that I will find you.
I will find you.
Oh, Ellen, we are so grateful to you for spending time with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for writing this piece. Congratulations on being the winner of the American Prize. We are so proud to have you as a member of our region, and we're so grateful to you for spending time with us to share this with us. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll encourage any of you interested specifically in that piece, go to the Graphite website and look up Across the Empty Square. And many thanks to my colleagues in Graphite. And I encourage you spend time on their site. And I'm grateful for them and for the many different publishing companies I'm honored to be affiliated with ECS in Oxford and Santa Barbara and Cola Voce. Go to their sites,
Go
go
to their sites.
go to their sites to
Absolutely.
support the work that they're doing, and they're looking to connect, make connections viable for many composers at work. So look forward to continuing that conversation, hopefully live with many of you in a short while in Cincinnati.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. You can also find Ellen at ellengilsonvoth.net, and you can read more about her and all of her works and get in touch with her if you would like to reach out and connect you and your choirs to Ellen and her work. Thank you so much, Ellen. We are so grateful. Mwah. Thank you.
Take care, Amanda.
Thank you.